opened the same weekend as the Michael Jackson biopic. It made $475,000. A movie that spent 5 years trying to get made, that is not a box office number. That is a dinner reservation. And that was just one of the films Michael completely wiped out. By the time that opening, and the honest answer, it was bad. Like, historically bad. The Michael Jackson biopic, simply called Michael, it buried films that had been running for weeks. In some cases, it killed movies that studios had been building for years, all in a single weekend. So let's get into it. It nearly doubled Bohemian Rhapsody's $51.1 million opening. And here's the part that makes this even more wild. Critics hated it. The film sat at a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. The BBC gave it 1 star domestically. That would have been a solid number, a respectable, but here's what makes this even more painful. James Wan had deliberately titled this film Lee Cronin's The Mummy. Not just The Mummy, Lee Cronin's The Mummy. The whole point was to tell the audience, this is not the 1999 Brendan Fraser film. Before you can understand how bad the damage was, you need to understand, in this video, already shaky, already below expectations. But then Michael opened the following weekend, and The Mummy fell 58.6%, dropping to just $5.6 million. Its 10-day total sat at $23.4 million. You will go through every film that got crushed, hear what the directors and studio heads actually said after the damage was done, and find out the one number that still has Hollywood talking. What Michael actually did at the box office. Heading into opening weekend, the people who made this film, producer Graham King and Lionsgate, were hoping for around $70 million, something new, something distinct, something with a real filmmaker's name on it. They put their branding and their reputation on this thing, and Michael made the whole effort disappear in a weekend. What this video is about. You clicked because you want to see exactly how bad the damage was. They got 97 million. That is the biggest opening weekend of any biopic in history. Not just music biopics, any biopic. It passed Oppenheimer. It beat Straight Outta Compton's long-standing domestic record of 60.2 million by more than 50%. Reviewers called it sanitized and shallow, but the audience? 96% verified hot score on Rotten Tomatoes, an A- on CinemaScore exit polls, a 7.7 out of 10 on IMDb. Did not just win its opening weekend, it erased competition. Weekend was over, studios were doing the math, and none of it looked good for them. You already know. The critics tried to stop it. The audience showed up anyway. $217 million globally in one weekend. That is the setup. Now let's talk about the victims. Victim number 1, The Mummy, April 17th, 2026. Okay, this one actually stings a little bit, because this was not some random studio dumping a low-budget film and hoping for the best. This was Jason Blum from Blumhouse. The guy behind Get Out, The Purge, Megan. So Anne Hathaway had 2 films releasing almost at the same time. One was an A24 story felt sanitized, too focused on protecting Michael Jackson's image.
For a biopic and the biggest box office opening day of 2026. Shamo!
Why do film critics hate the new Michael Jackson movie, and why are general audiences love it? The movie just came out this past weekend. People have been making their way to theaters, seeing the movie, and for the most part, they have been coming out of the theater happy with the movie. But before that, of course, there was press screenings, media screenings, and film critics were giving this a really low grade. Now, why is that? The movie is a broad overview of Michael Jackson's life, especially at the peak of his career. It starts around the Jackson 5 era, and it ends right at the back.
And James Wan from Atomic Monster, the guy behind The Conjuring, Aquaman, Insidious, 2 of the most reliable names in genre filmmaking, together on the same project. And the film, the art house thriller that cratered against Michael. The other was a legacy sequel that was about to kick off the entire summer box office. The timing could not have been more awkward, and Michael made it 10 times worse. The critics tried to kill it and lost. Okay, this is one of the most interesting parts of the whole Michael story, because what happened between the critics and the audience is not something you see often. Critics went after this film hard. The BBC gave it 1 star and described it as a bland and barely competent daytime TV movie. Across the board, the main criticism was that they made together, it opened to $13.5 million the week before Michael arrived. The budget was $22 million. The estimated break-even was around 55 million. It is trending nowhere near that. Victim number 2, A24's Mother Mary, April 24th, 2026. Now let's talk about A24, because A24 getting a box office reality check is something you do not see very often. Mother Mary is a psychological drama thriller directed by David Lowery, the guy behind A Ghost Story and The Green Knight, and starring Anne Hathaway. Rather than actually telling his story, the overall critic score on Rotten Tomatoes landed at 40%. And the audience did not care at all. 96% verified hot audience score, A- on CinemaScore, 7.7 on IMDb. The people who actually went to the theater and bought a ticket gave this film their stamp of approval, loudly.
Anyone who thought the Michael Jackson film was gonna fail must be crying right now, because the Michael Jackson movie is now tracking to be the most successful musical biopic of all time. Michael has earned 40 million in its domestic
It's been 10 days. To absolutely nobody's surprise, except for the media, Michael is just destroying the box office, and its fan base is just as alive as it was when he was around. This is a movie that hasn't even opened yet in Korea or Japan, some of the biggest markets for movies, and some of the biggest fan bases for Michael. When that happens, we're seeing $1 billion at the end of the month. I made a video back in November talking about how this is easily going to smash $1 billion, and these are some of the things people had to say. I mean, Twister is sold out across stores because of this movie. We're coming for that $1 billion, and then we're sweeping the Oscars.
So what did the competition actually say?
biggest opening day of all time for
A24, David Lowery, Anne Hathaway. On paper, that sounds like an award season juggernaut. In reality, it grossed $2.2 million total against a $20 million budget. On its opening weekend, it landed in 9th place with just $1.1 million from 1,103 theaters. That is about $96 million less than what Michael made that same weekend. $96 million. Let that comparison sit for a second.
He was standing under the lights.
But here's the part that nobody really talks about. Mother Mary hit theaters 1 week before The Devil Wears Prada 2, the sequel that reunites Anne Hathaway with Meryl Streep, Stanley Tucci, and Emily Blunt.
Bad tour. After the bad tour is when a lot of the allegations and controversies surrounding Michael Jackson started, and it doesn't touch on that at all. And I think the film critics were looking for a deep dive into the psyche of Michael Jackson, answering questions like, why was he the way he was? Why did he have these odd behaviors? What was going on in his head around these controversies? And the movie doesn't touch on that at all. The movie really serves to highlight the legacy of Michael Jackson and the obstacles he had to overcome to become the biggest artist in the world. Now, what the audiences are having a really fun time with is the performances, and rightfully so.
So not only did movies get crushed, critics got proven wrong by nearly $100 million and 10 theaters. That is not a box. Inside the industry had to respond. And what they said is worth hearing, because these are not fan reactions. These are the people who run the business. Michael O'Leary, the head of Cinema United, which is the exhibition industry's main trade organization, came out and said that Michael proved audiences will show up for compelling stories on the big screen. He specifically pointed to Michael's momentum alongside other recent hits like Project Hail Mary and the Super Mario Galaxy movie as proof that theatrical cinema is still alive. Lionsgate chair Adam Fogelson kept it even simpler. Office number. That is a dinner reservation for a medium-sized office. A movie that spent half a decade trying to get made, opened on the same weekend as one of the biggest biopics in Hollywood history, and got completely erased. Take Scream 7, franchise best entry. It opened to $64 million domestic and ran for months. Its complete global lifetime. Victim number 3, Desert Warrior, April 24th to 25th, 2026. And now we get to the one that is almost hard to watch. Desert Warrior, starring Anthony Mackie. A film that had been in production since 2021, 5 years of filming, development, and getting it to theaters. Distributed by Vertical Entertainment. It opened the same weekend as Michael Jackson. It made $475,000 from 1,000 total, sat at $213.5 million. Michael passed that number in one weekend. Then there is GOAT, 190.5 million lifetime, gone. Sam Raimi's Send Help, 94 million lifetime, passed. A24's The Drama, 99.9 million lifetime, erased. Scream 7 had actually celebrated a franchise best world.
To the biggest box office flop in the history of cinema, Desert Warrior just came out in theaters, $150 million budget, and it only grossed a couple $100,000. The stars, Anthony Mackie.
Music licensing reimagined.
It was a legend.
Other victims. Films, it went back and lapped films that had been running for weeks, sometimes months, and passed their entire career earnings in a single opening weekend. Worldwide opening, Michael passed in their entire run in one weekend. Now this is where it starts to get almost comedic. Michael did not just destroy the films that were in theaters at the same time. Of 97.2 million, Michael matched that number on its domestic opening alone, then kept going globally. And if you are wondering whether theaters were still packed at this point, yes. Line interview. He compared the experience to one of the most genuinely bizarre, and he said this whole Michael situation felt similar. Which movie getting destroyed surprised you the most? And do you think Michael can actually crack $1 billion? Bizarre moments in his career. He said he was literally handing in the director's cut of Emancipation, his Will Smith film. They were still selling out. At some point during all of this, the people actually, he said, if you give audiences what they want, they will come. That's the whole quote. He did not, he survived both. And his film just took down the entire spring box office. So now I want to know from you, need anything else? And then there was director Antoine Fuqua. He had already been through chaos with this film. Reshoots, delays, the whole thing. But in an April 26th the exact day Will Smith walked up on stage and slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars, he said he was floored. Or does it fall short? See you next time.